You got the raise. You paid off the debt. You hit the number you swore would finally make you feel okay. And then, almost immediately, it wasn't enough anymore. That's not a personal failure. That's your brain working exactly as designed. And it's costing you more than you think. Here's a question that probably makes you a little uncomfortable. What's the number that would make you feel financially secure? Maybe you've got one. Maybe it's a salary, a savings balance, a net worth figure you've been quietly carrying around for years. And here's the thing, there's a decent chance you've already hit a version of that number before, maybe a smaller one from 5 years ago. And when you got there, you felt good for a little while. And then the bar moved. This isn't a motivation problem. It isn't a discipline problem. It's a deeply wired feature of your brain called hedonic adaptation, sometimes called the hedonic treadmill, and it is one of the most quietly destructive forces in personal finance. The core idea is this: your brain is not designed to sit still and feel satisfied. It's designed to detect change. When something good happens, a raise, a windfall, a debt finally cleared, your emotional response spikes upward. But over time, your brain recalibrates. The new good thing becomes the new normal. The spike flattens, and what felt like enough yesterday becomes the floor you're standing on today, looking up at the next ceiling. Psychologists have studied this for decades. Lottery winners, it turns out, return to roughly their baseline happiness within a year or two of their win. People who receive significant pay increases report a meaningful boost in financial satisfaction. But that boost tends to fade faster than the lifestyle changes the raise funded. And this matters enormously for money decisions, because most of us are making financial plans based on a future feeling that our own brain is biologically committed to erasing. We're running toward a finish line that is, by design, always one stride ahead of us. So before we talk about what to do, let's understand the mechanism a little more deeply. Think of your brain's emotional response system like a thermostat. When the temperature in a room changes dramatically, it gets hot, it gets cold, the thermostat kicks on and works hard to bring things back to a set point. Your psychological response to money works almost exactly the same way. You get a bonus. Emotional temperature spikes. Brain notices the spike, flags it as temporary, and over the following weeks and months quietly dials everything back toward your personal baseline. Researchers call this your set point, a relatively stable level of subjective well-being that you tend to return to regardless of what happens to you, good or bad. Now here's where it gets specifically dangerous for your finances. The treadmill doesn't just affect how you feel, it affects what you want. Because as your emotional response to a new income level fades, your desires recalibrate upward to match. You don't just stop feeling as good about the new salary. You start genuinely wanting the next one. The new apartment that felt like a dream becomes just where you live. The car you saved 3 years for becomes the baseline against which the next car is judged. This is the part that trips people up the most. Hedonic adaptation doesn't feel like adaptation. It feels like legitimate new needs. It just quietly reframes your current situation as insufficiency and your next target as necessity. And because this happens gradually, invisibly, and universally, it's genuinely hard to catch yourself doing it. You're not being greedy. You're not being irresponsible. You are being entirely human. But being human in this particular way has a very specific financial cost. And to see that cost clearly, you need to meet someone who lived it out loud. Marcus was 31 when he landed the job that was supposed to change everything. He'd been grinding for years, entry-level roles, roommates well into his late 20s, carefully tracked grocery budgets. When the offer came in at nearly double his previous salary, he remembers sitting in his car in a parking lot reading the email 3 times. For about 4 months, Marcus felt genuinely, thoroughly okay about money for the first time in his adult life. He paid off a credit card. He moved into a one-bedroom apartment by himself. He bought a proper couch. He told his sister he finally felt like a real adult. Then, quietly, without a single dramatic moment, that feeling dissolved. The one-bedroom started to feel cramped. He worked from home now. He needed a proper office, didn't he? The couch was fine, but the TV was too small for the wall. His colleagues had parking spots in the building's garage. He still paid for street parking. None of these things were crises. They were just the new texture of insufficiency his brain had manufactured to fill the space where satisfaction used to be. 2 years into the new salary, Marcus was saving almost exactly the same percentage of his income as he had before. The dollar amounts were bigger, but the margin was identical. And when I asked him what number would make him feel secure, he named a figure that was, almost to the dollar, the same ratio above his current income as his dream salary had once been above his old one. The treadmill had kept perfect pace. He'd run hard for 2 years and ended up in exactly the same psychological place he started. This is the cruelty of it. Marcus is not unusual. Marcus is the default. Here's where the hedonic treadmill gets genuinely insidious, because so far it might sound like a kind of cruel neutrality. You adapt upward to good things, the good feeling fades, life goes on. Uncomfortable but maybe livable, except the treadmill is not neutral. It has a very specific directional bias that behavioral economists have documented repeatedly, and it maps almost perfectly onto the thing that destroys long-term financial health. Here's the bias. We adapt to gains quickly, but we adapt to losses slowly and painfully. The psychological term for the asymmetric response to gains and losses is loss aversion, the finding that losses feel roughly twice as bad as equivalent gains feel good. And when you layer loss aversion onto the hedonic treadmill, you get a trap that is very hard to escape. Because once your lifestyle has inflated to absorb a new income level, cutting back doesn't feel like returning to normal. It feels like genuine loss. So any reduction from that minimum registers as deprivation, even if an objective outside observer would describe your life as entirely comfortable. This is why lifestyle inflation is so much stickier than lifestyle deflation. Going up is easy and feels natural. Going back down feels like punishment, even when the numbers say you should. It's why people continue spending at a previous income level after a pay cut. It's why just cutting back a little advice, though mathematically simple, is psychologically excruciating. The treadmill moves in one direction, and once you've walked a certain distance down it, stepping backward requires fighting something close to grief. That's not weakness. That's the architecture of the trap, and the cost of staying in it is enormous. Let's make the abstract concrete, because this is where most videos on this topic stay politely vague, and I want to be specific with you. The hedonic treadmill doesn't just steal your sense of satisfaction, it steals compounding. And compounding over time is the only mechanism that turns ordinary income into real financial security. Here's the pattern it creates. Every time your income increases, your brain recalibrates your needs upward before you've had a chance to redirect the extra money toward your future. The lifestyle expands to meet and usually slightly exceed the new income, and the savings rate, like Marcus's, stays flat or even dips during the transition period. Over a working life, this means you might earn substantially more in your 40s than your 20s, but arrive at retirement with a nest egg that reflects not your peak earning, but your floor spending. Because you never consistently kept a gap between what you earned and what your brain decided you needed. Now add the loss aversion bias. Even when you recognize the pattern and want to course correct, You're fighting a psychological system that frames cutting back as losing something real. So the moment of clear-eyed resolution, "I'm going to increase my savings rate this year," runs directly into the emotional experience of deprivation, and the resolution loses more often than it should. The third cost is the one nobody talks about: the perpetual low-grade financial anxiety. Because if your brain is designed to keep moving the goalposts of enough, you will never arrive at the feeling of security you're working toward. The number you're saving toward will, when you reach it, immediately feel like not quite enough. Without understanding this mechanism, that anxiety feels like evidence that you genuinely don't have enough. It's actually evidence that your brain is doing exactly what it was built to do. The cost is a life spent running and never quite arriving. So what do you actually do with this? Because knowing the name of the trap doesn't automatically spring you out of it, and I don't want to leave you with a clever explanation and no foothold. The idea is simple. Commit to redirecting a portion of every future raise before it hits your checking account, and before your brain has a chance to fold it into your baseline. If your savings rate today is 10%, decide now that the next raise will automatically bump that to 12. You never see the extra amount as spendable. You never adapt to having it. The treadmill never gets the chance to calibrate around it. This is the rare case where automation genuinely defeats a psychological bias, because it removes the moment of choice that the bias exploits. The second move is to deliberately slow adaptation on experiences and possessions you've already paid for. Psychologists call this savoring, the intentional act of re-noticing what you have before reaching for the next thing. It sounds soft, but the research on it is real. People who actively practice gratitude for existing possessions show measurably slower hedonic adaptation. The treadmill doesn't stop, but it slows. Third, and this is the uncomfortable one, audit your reference group. Hedonic adaptation is massively accelerated by social comparison. The single fastest way to move your baseline upward is to constantly observe people who have more than you. This doesn't mean avoiding ambitious people. It means being deliberate about who you measure yourself against financially, because that comparison is quietly setting your thermostat. Finally, build a concrete picture of your actual future. The treadmill is most powerful in the abstract. When you have specific, real numbers attached to what your retirement actually requires, not a vague, reassuring feeling, but a real projection, the future stops being a shapeless goal that your brain can perpetually defer. Give the goal edges. Make it real. The treadmill has less power over a specific destination than an imaginary one. The uncomfortable truth about your money brain is this: it was never designed to let you feel like you have enough. But once you see the mechanism clearly, you can stop running and start building. Your money brain doesn't switch off when it comes to retirement. That's exactly where these biases cost the most. I built a free tool that shows you the real math, no spreadsheet required. It's called Granary, links in the description.